Pink Cloud Radio 84. And it can't be ignored, it can't be debated in a certain extent, but it can be. I think what I'm going to say today will really say something more for me. And say something more for this whole Death King living. Not hard to do, really. Not hard for anybody to do, in fact. And I think that's really the whole point of it. That it's something maybe not for everyone, but everyone is capable, I guess you could say. Because it's about discouragement coming from the outside. It has to be relieved from the inside. Objects or others can't be solved. You can, And it's true, This discouragement that we see. Oh, yes, of course. The one thing in our lives that somehow gets us to this fluttering, thought of, oh no, what can I do here? What am I doing wrong here? What can I do here to fix this here? And that here, can I fix this here too? It's very much a running game of, well, let's see if we can fix this by doing this. Or by not doing this, or by fixing this. And this here will go over here. It doesn't work that way. It's hard to say it, really, because it's something that is impossibly held. I don't think a lot of people realize that what we try to junk up ourselves with, trying to keep discouragement almost like a play instrument, I guess you could say. Though it's hard to even say that. And I think it's because what we do with discouragement and encouragement and a lot of this stuff is try to face it in the wrong way. In a lot of ways we face it in the worst way possible. And we try to interlace ourselves in some kind of answer. But most of the time that answer could be the worst one possible. We don't ever try to face it in the right way. So we're always trying to, try to conclude things in a certain fashion. In a lot of ways we make things worse because we constantly try to trip over what we're doing. And maybe even easier, this discouragement, the real icing on the cake of this discouragement is that we value it in the wrong way. Discouragement is fine. We can learn from things, but see, that's the thing though. We're never told we can fix it from the outside. I don't remember that part. And I think that's an important part to hold up. Because once you try to clear up something by doing it a certain way, that's your problem. Discouragement coming from the outside has to be relieved from the inside. Can't let things bother you. But it's not about things. It's about objects or others. They can't be solved. There's no solution to something that is a problem. When we place blame on something or someone, it's fine to a certain extent. But it can't be solved to the same person. Like, even if I have to take it more personally. Looking at 9/11 or looking at history in general. History in our lifetime, history in the Roman Empire's lifetime, anything's. Once you start seeing that a lot of people are using it to their advantages only, you have a hard time. You do. And it's not impossible to give up to a certain extent. I don't. But it's not because I want to place blame on them. Oh, it's their fault. They're the ones doing this. To a certain extent, it's true they are. We could blame the people. We could blame the people in charge. We could blame the government in itself. But see, the government is made of people. So those people obviously don't understand the trickle down. Once you do something to the top, once you do something from the top, it's going to affect everybody, even people at the top. Yes, it may not affect right away. And that's the whole point of this. This whole thing about what the Pink Cloud Radio is. Once you have a voice that is not stronger, not better, not anything worse, better, here, there, or the other, it's just that there's a certain extent where you start not worrying about non sequiturs, meaning that you don't need a complete conclusion or need to look back to find an answer. Not everything that was written down in stone in our so-called minds, faculty of minds, about what science is, about what religion is, about what all these so-called adherences to human value show, have actually hurt people more. Because we always look for those conclusions. We don't ever look for ourselves in that so-called discouragement even, let's call it. Because that discouragement in itself, it's not going to be solved from the outside. Those things have never solved anything. If they have, well, let's see, religion wouldn't have started wars, it would have ended wars. But it didn't. Yes, it takes time though, Marcello. No, sorry. If something truly, in fact, is creating an image of it, nothing takes time that does something wrong in the first place. That does something wrong and agrees to it and says it's okay, steps back, doesn't say anything about it. If you want me to bring out every fact that they've done historically, then I will. But I don't need to. You can do that yourself. And yes, you can escape it and say, I can't believe humans would be that bad, I don't want to look at it. See, that's the problem. We don't look at our dark sides either. This isn't about really what they've done. It's about the fact, can we look at it directly and say, okay, I can look at this, and I'm not, pulled back from it, not wanting to see it at all. See, because that's an important quality right there. Are we going to face these things, or are we just going to say, well, it's not my fault, I didn't do it? See, so the blame that I can create, or anybody in the movements that are around today, will actually help people say, I didn't do it. It actually helps those that don't want to take responsibility. I do agree that it's volunteerism. Everything should be volunteerist. So when we're basically saying you're forced on healthcare, or let's take away your guns, nope, that's not going to fix anything. In fact, that's actually showing how much we're moving away from a freedom set of mind. Because it should be voluntary. These voluntary inactive qualities are not being done by us. We're not the ones going, well, let's go do this. Let's force healthcare on everybody. Let's force it on everybody. Well, if something's so great, you don't force it on them. Democracies around the world, a lot of them that are being set up right now, heck, even the war in Iraq, when it ended, guess what happened? It ended not because Obama wanted it to. We could say all we want. That's a funny thing. People believe that he actually wanted it to end. But it was actually because Iraqi people were going to start going to court for what happened. They basically threatened them to say, you better stop doing this stuff, because stuff they were doing was illegal. And they were taking notice of it. So they got their troops out of there. So that's what really happened. They still have troops in there, of course, but the fact is they didn't do it because they wanted to. They did it because they were forced to. Or else they would have been, the image would have been tarnished. And you can't tarnish an image of people that try to do good. Of course, that's a very particular kind of statement to say good. Because good is actually something that can't be planted in one little instance. It has to always be there in the first place. Wasn't there to begin with. So this discouragement, what is it? It's everything and anything and nothing. But it can only be relieved from inside. From the deep inside. From everything. And I think that's one thing that I've learned about, encouragement, discouragement, this kind of stuff that people use all the time to describe what they deal with, what they don't deal with, and what they want and what they don't want. What I've learned is a lot of this stuff is very much based on our philosophy of living. In a lot of ways, it's because of our philosophy of living that we use things like discouragement to affect us. Because we think that those things are, that person wouldn't say that kind of thing unless there's some truth to it, And a lot of times we deny ourselves our own capabilities by what this discouragement can do. So to say that, I'm not saying 100% any of this needs to be true, even with conspiracies, supposedly. Although, at a certain point, conspiracies are not conspiracies anymore. They're facts. Because they're found out. They're in the public domain. They're publicly known. Evidences and facts. So, that's all they are. Now, if you want to ignore them, you can actually. History has changed many times over because of that, because people didn't look at those facts and evidence and cared about it. So discouragement in itself has been done to the public to say, well, don't look at that, believe us. We wouldn't lie to you. Said the same people let's say. But it's the whole point, It's the old idea of there are still people in power and high positions that haven't changed for a long time. Which means that all this stuff about president changing or anything is very little, All you do is just change Caesar's clothing. You just act like Caesar. There you go. Caesar did it, and so will everybody else. You just need something in front of the screen to give a nice, value to everything, And that's it. Doesn't mean there is a value to everything, or to everyone. And I think with objects and others, that's what it really is, It can't be solved. But you can. But only you can. And I think inspiring love and the sweetest affection rather than awe or ordinary admiration. There we go. Yeah, I do try to inspire love more and sweetest affections rather than awe or ordinary admiration. I think it's because with awe and ordinary admiration, it can be like this is how I look at this thing. You look almost up to it, and admiration does that a lot. Ordinary admiration is just, I'm not saying there's something different, a different kind of admiration, because I actually call it ordinary admiration because it's not very special at all. If you admire something about me, it's wonderful. But don't admire it too much. Don't admire me too much because of that admiration. There's admirable qualities, stuff like that, where people say, and it makes sense to say that. Like certain things should be, in a sense, admirable. But in a lot of ways, a lot of people try to stifle their way of doing it too, by doing that. By saying, I admire that quality in you. They don't want to do it themselves. They think, well, I can't do that. Okay, well, then, admiring me for something that you can't do, I don't know what that means. Should I be grateful? I don't think so. I mean, to me, it doesn't even make sense. I admire that about you because I can't do it. Oh, wonderful. Doesn't make any sense, but okay, thank you, I guess. I don't know what that means. Because to me, love and the sweetest affection is what counts, It's not about the things we can't notice or can't do. It's about the things that we can do. And I think those are the things that we need to say more, mention more of. And it's hard to. Even those kind of things, that's where people get away from us and get away from themselves. It's not about really what we think about each other. And that's the problem. Most people do think it's that. Most people do think, because they've been indoctrinated into this thinking of democracy so much. But, the biggest joke in the world is that there's only two sides to things. No, there isn't. There's much more than that. I wish there's only two sides to things. But life isn't that easy. And I think democracy to a lot of people has tried to make life too easy. To just kind of skip over the bad things that are being done in the world. Looking at the military-industrial complex, looking at what NATO can do. Looking at how the United Nations, in fact, votes down any country that wants to say something differently, that does say something differently, it's all voted down if it's not in the part of the top 6 nations. Doesn't sound too good to me. It doesn't sound very favorable to be part of the United Nations if that's how you're going to be treated if you're not in the top 6 nations. When we talk about the first world, the third world, those kind of things, it actually stands for a lot more than you'd think. It's not just the name. It means how much value they'll have in a voice. That's why it's easy to put down a whole country that's in that position, like Afghanistan after 9/11, and everybody's okay with it. Because to a certain extent, they don't have a voice. They don't have a voice in the United Nations itself. And you could look at any place in the world and see that. Because basically, the only people that have a voice are the people who have a voice, technically. Though speaking, we just believe it. That's it. Being the voice of reason, it doesn't mean you have to do things that are reason. It just means you have to say things that are reason. That's it. And I think that's the one thing I've learned after being alive this long. Most people can contradict and be hypocrites. And it's getting tiring. It's just getting tiring dealing with it. there I'll be truly honest. And I think that's what I saw within the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Constitution gives limited and grants the power to the government. Well, hold it. You can't do both. You can't do both. Because once you do both, they're wearing Caesar. They're doing Caesar's work. Like from their own empire. And just get whatever power they want. You know, I never heard a government say, I'm going to limit my power today. Nope. It's a big joke, actually. And it's funny as hell that people believe that they'll actually treat you well with how much they could grant themselves. They're still human at the end of the day, and we don't see them. There's no cameras on them. There's cameras on us. As citizens, there's cameras on us. In fact, in California, for example, people that work for the state actually get license plates that they can do anything they want. They don't get pulled over for anything. So they have freedoms that are so granted. They don't even need to worry about the stuff that's around us. That's around us as humans. That's been created in this systemic process. They could do whatever the fuck they want. Rules? There are no rules. Doesn't show much. It doesn't show much challenge that we can have if they can do all that. So I've been in this world encased in a carbonite, making, as with Han Solo at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, and done in the Empire Strikes Back. I've been in this, but not any longer. Not any longer at all. And I think that's the one thing I've learned about this absolutism. It's inspiring love. That's all. I'd rather inspire in people than admire, than get admiring from people. And I think it's a big difference. It's a huge difference when you see people admire you compared to when you see people get inspired by you. You know, it's a very big difference. And it's something that I see sometimes from the wrong kind of attitude. Not to say that it's not important, but to say that it's not going to do anything right now. Look at that. It's not going to do anything for you. And I think it's a frugalness that people have when attempting to try to break from what they believe is a value in the world. But may not be anymore. I'm not talking about the group thing, because a lot of people assume that everybody's just trying to go along to get along. Not everybody is. Some people actually don't try to get along, but have to go along in this world anyway. I have to, I hate it. I hate it that I can't be myself and get a big award for it. Not idolization, not hanging on, not put up on a pedestal or something because of it, but just to actually live it. Live it without criticizing, and even my own, I guess you could say. But truly, when you have people bad in the world that can do anything the fuck they want, they'll do it. Don't grant them the powers, because they'll do it. And I think it's the one thing of what I've learned between this hypocritical contradictions, this kind of stuff. It's so easy to believe that people, it's so easy to have hope that people can do so much good, but then only see them do bad and still believe they could do good. It's so funny to see that. Like, I'm not saying you have to be negative about it, but the fact is you have to recognize what's happening. And a lot of people don't. They just live in their American dream. American dream is, you have to be asleep to believe it. And most people are. They're not awake to a lot of stuff, but maybe they are. But being ignorant is their bliss. And it's a fun time. Because the sweetest affections go away. All you do is feel awe and ordinary admiration. Yep, the usual. Nothing out of character with that. There we go. And I think really that's the process and the elimination and everything, God giving the answer. Making governments, God progresses, populations and persons to sublimate all themselves to the mercy and violence from the ones who give answers. So thinking of Revelations and everything, like the end of the world and the end of, everything like that. God giving the answer. God didn't give this answer. That's funny that people believe so emphatically that God gave this answer for people to create this. He didn't. In fact, it's probably more the fact that human reaction has created this, not human interaction. We didn't interact with each other a lot. If we did it in a reaction way, a reactionary way, where it was just war, collision, death. Now, it doesn't mean that one side should know better than the other, which is what sometimes people would say. Like when you look back at Native Americans, a lot of people could just say, well, it's the natives' fault. Yeah, I mean, they didn't try to kill right away. Man, what horrible people, you know. You know, it's funny. Sometimes people say that it's worse when people don't try to kill you right away. I kind of agree. I'd have to say because both sides did that, technically. But the fact that people came here and met other people here and did that to other people here doesn't speak well of those people that came here. It doesn't. And it doesn't speak well of our future. No matter how far back it is, the fact that our future started with that doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound good for our present condition. Because that stuff is continuous. All that stuff that happened before. That river of blood lasts forever. You know, and the way it started, that river of blood, is going to be very important. Because it may have been a setup in itself. We don't know that. But I think I've gotten past the fact that, oh, well, you know, oh, the government agent under here, you know, I wouldn't just blame anybody for being that if they don't agree with me, or if they, so-called infiltrate a movement, which can happen. I'm not saying that it's impossible, because sometimes it is very possible for people to just go out there. The only thing that I believe, and I've said this before, is that people don't necessarily go outside the door if they don't care about something. Truly, they don't. You know, they're not going to go outside and do something, go out protest, go out do this or that, the other, if they don't care. And our society has now deemed almost a fanatic value of that stuff. Like, oh, that's fanatics. Those people are crazy. Fanatics. They want to stop war. Fanatics would be somebody who actually wants to encourage it. Keep it going. It's funny, a lot of people who are peaceful are considered evil. Are considered more violent. But look at the crushing damage of war. But of course we don't, because we don't show that on TV, because we learned from Vietnam. We can't show the people that, because then they'll really protest. And we can't shut them up. Because we're not shutting up. So I think in a lot of ways, the public itself has probably given itself away to let the governments do whatever they want, because they don't want to see the reality. And when they do speak up. So it's not very, I guess it's not impossible that people would speak up. It's just a matter of how much it would take to let them speak up completely. And it would be 100%. It would have to be everything. And I think in a lot of ways that's why journalism is not journalism anymore to me. Because I feel like a lot of journalists don't talk about everything. They only talk about what they're told to be talking about. You know, and it does create a very, nothing is there attitude. And it does. It creates a very much, as long as you're dealing with unimportance, everything is fine. You know, I could look at the weather every day and it still wouldn't bother me. Which means that it's not a valued thing. It's not a valued commodity. It's not going to change my life. Oh, it's going to rain tomorrow. So fucking what? So fucking what? You know, and, I'd hate to say it that way, but it's true. But I don't hate to say it, because it's funny that people make such a huge, grandiose attitude about these things. Coffee does this. Well, okay, that's in the news now. Knew that. Didn't need to hear a poll about it, or statistics, or research scientifically about it. Common sense says that to me, which means that my instincts and guts were correct anyway. So why the fuck do I need a scientist to tell me that? I think making governments, God progresses populations and persons to sublimate all themselves to the mercy and violence from the ones who gives answers. So that means God is in what it's God verment. which means that the government itself is the God to the people. So we sublimate people, the masses, to the mercy and violence from the ones who gives them answers. The God isn't giving them answers. We could look at the Bible all we want, and people could say all they want that, oh, well, the Bible gives you answers for everything in here, you know. The same thing with science. Scientists give you answers for everything out here. Then you figure out that, well, if that's the case, then we don't need government. Nobody ever says that part. Somehow, we have government still. Well, we don't need people to check and balance us. If we're created in an image to do so, then our human power, our human will, our human passion will create a better direction than anybody else could for another person. Because most likely their assumptions, their characteristics are going to come about on us and try to say, oh, this is what you should be. Well, no, this is what I should be. My name is this, and this is what I am. This is who I am. This is how I am. And then we create a better image through that. But we don't. Sadly, a lot of what we do is progress through the means to give up to be merciful to the people around us, to let those people dictate and try to, I guess you could say, maim our kind of living. It's not hard to see it because you see it every day. You know, and it's, I mean, to me personally, it's hard to look at because it's a lot, man. It's crushing almost to me. But that's because a lot of it is really showing that people don't want to create themselves. They want somebody else to do it. You know, it's so exhausting in a way to look at it because it's so terrible to see that people are so fearful and so afraid of what they are, of who they are, of how they are. You know, and that in itself shows what people will do to get away from themselves, that they'll basically let governments, let anybody around them. You know, it's not necessarily about rebellion or compliance, but the fact that you can agree, you can disagree, you can do both. You can say you're wrong, they're both right. But to not even let that happen, it shows how much people don't care for freedom, really. I've said it. You know, America, a lot of people, I think, don't care for freedom. It's pretty sad, but our struggle is freedom in itself. That's what it is. I mean, our history shows that. You know, and whether we look at it from a perspective of if it's continuous, it means that our freedom hasn't come yet. And the fact remains that we've allowed anybody to go into courts and fight for their individuality. But that doesn't mean it's only going to be people doing it. That doesn't mean it's only going to be the population that's not in the government doing it. It's going to be the government doing it. It's going to be corporations, banks, and all these other things that are around us doing it, because independent things can do it. Well, those are independent, even though they're not, you know, they're not human. The fact that they interact with humans is enough, I guess. Although my personal appeal is that no, they shouldn't have that. And they shouldn't be rewarded because of it. Rewarded, I guess you could say. I mean, that's where I come from with this. And that's what I mean by, you know, making governments God progressive, you know, populations and persons, you know, and like I said, this is the revelations of it. It is what we get down to, you know, and at the end of the day, it can be fooled around with in a different way, meaning that the good side, technically the good side, can prevail. Because the one thing about people who are humane about things, generally, and that may not be anybody in the so-called humane societies of the world that care about humans or dogs or whatever, or animals or whatever, it may not be those people. Those people may be doing it just for the money. But there are people who would care and do care, and at the end of the day, they could vanquish anybody else that doesn't want to deal with it, that doesn't like it the way it is, you know, like me or anybody. But at the end of the day, their ideas will kill them. So it's going to be fun watching that, you know. But, you know, I'll be watching it probably from a safe distance or when I'm dead. Because it probably is not going to come about that easily. You know, a lot of people say, like, people will give up their freedoms for anything. There's a general context where people will not so much fight for it, but they'll keep it going as long as they can. Which is pretty sad. Because truly that shows why the French Revolution happened the way it did. Why it turned out to be blood and violence. Because truly, that's what it takes. That's the only thing people see to change things, is war. Because that's all they've been shown. So the only thing they believe is the same thing that they see. So when they say, like, you know, there could be infiltrators in something, oh no, this isn't true now. Oh, these groups, these fucking groups, there's people, there's traitors in these things. People don't have to believe the same thing, even within the same thing. It shows, you know. That's why a lot of people say, oh, at least with these two sides, they let them exist. Yeah, but it's not them who should make these things exist. It shouldn't be the governments that let us make something that makes something solvent, that makes something real. It should be real to us as humans. That's the thing that I don't like personally, when I see it from that point of view. When it's only existing if they say it exists. Well, no, they've lied to us before. Yes, they brought up the facts, but they didn't bring up a lot of facts. They brought up the general facts and said, well, it didn't turn out as that was told that way. As if they're hiding something else. They didn't say it as if, well, here's all the truths, okay, guys? You know? And I think that's the one thing. They can do whatever the fuck they want, but by the end of the day, by the end of the real life that we're living, that's coming down from everything that happened before, it's not going to go back. You know, you can't rewrite the storyline, which means that this storyline is going to be believed for a while now. And that's sad. That so many people are going to be avoided because of it. And so many people have. You know, and being in the paranormal field, I've learned a lot about that. Because it's not really about the fact that if these things are truly happening or not. It's the fact that there's so many people that in high positions that dictate our presence on this earth as a human. That's not freedom. If we have to be dictated by our presence by somebody else, if we have to be represented by somebody else, that's not true freedom. Freedom represents itself, represents me. It doesn't represent itself through the hard stick, baton of a police officer, or the spray in the eyes. You know, it doesn't represent itself through that. Those are just bullies and gangs right there. Those are the same things that you see on TV with the gang sweeps. These gangs are probably doing the only thing they can do left. And I think it's funny that people put down people who stand up against the tyranny at times. When it gets really hot, you know, you're going to do the same exact thing. You may not do it in the same exact way. In fact, you may just die. Because you never respected the people that did, you know. And truly, I think everything should be respected, negative or good. Which we already look at things in a grim way if we look at the truth. That's why we have these holidays, like Thanksgiving. Oh, yes, wonderful, Thanksgiving. That's the only day? That's it? That's the only thing we can look at for one day? If you think about that, that's pretty horrible. It's not about the fact that you need to celebrate it each day, but the fact that you make it into a traditional aspect shows how much it's forgotten. Shows how much history itself was all forgotten and destroyed and crushed. Under what? Under the pretense of creating a tradition out of it? That's it? Well, that doesn't help anybody else then. It shows that everybody else would just end up in the same barrel. And by the end of it, there'll be no traditions left. There'll be nothing left. Because we wiped out on the face of the earth everything that happened. But everything that happened will come back and will be erased too. So maybe it'll be better. Because somebody else that won't pester people, or pester a living thing, can live on. And not be bothered and not be crushed by everything around it. Because I don't want to understand the unknown. I don't want to be around the unknown. I want everything to be defined. Fine line. I think that's what I've learned. It's pretty sad that most people want that. It really breaches the contract of living, I think. And it does. It breaches the contract of so much that is living in our world. That we need complete answers. No, we don't. We don't need any fucking answers. In fact, we don't need anything. All we have to do is work at the things we've always done. Most people don't want to do that. That's why we have computers. That's why we have technology. We could avoid all that other stuff. We don't need to be entrapped inside ourselves of our emotions, feelings, sensitivities. Let's trap ourselves inside technology, send a text message here and there every single moment, and be concentrated on it completely. So we don't have to worry about the rest. So then, talking past people happens enough when majority and groupthink is avoided. Individuality, shown as rebellion a lot of times, and the grim reality test is not just put one subjection of peoples higher than others. And I think that's what happens with talking past people. It happens enough when majority and groupthink is avoided. You know, you talk past people if they're in the majority and they groupthink about things, you know. You're just talking past them, you know, because there's a rotted wire in a lot of people that says, well, you're just doing this because, and they have their answer. It's just like if somebody were to ask me, are you gay or something? You know, in that way of like, well, you already have an answer, you know. So I don't want to disappoint your answer, so what do you think? Do you think I'm gay? You know, I mean, I'll be gay if you want me to, you know, if that makes you happy, you know. Or at the other side, I could say only toward you. Because right there and then, you're proving how much of a person you'd subjugate in a relationship. If I wanted to be treated like that in a relationship, I'd be in a relationship with my grandmother. Thank you very much. It's a big joke, but it's true. If I wanted to be subjugated throughout my whole lifetime, through my experience of living, I don't know why you'd want to treat somebody like shit when you were treated like shit. But it makes sense if you keep it hidden. Especially if you've done nothing for it, for yourself. If all you've done is look at it and say, well, it's there, it's caged, and I can't do anything about it. I think I've lived in this life and I've seen it. Definitively, no. But the progress of what we do hasn't happened. No progress yet. Certain people have. But it takes a long, long way. Because a lot of stuff ain't easy. Especially if you were treated uneasily. And I think that's what I mean by when you talk past people. It's avoided. It's avoided. Oh, very much avoided. Give the middle finger. You give cuss words. It's funny that a lot of people put down cuss words. Because they use them enough with people who they don't agree with. So it's funny when people say like, you know, I don't really like cuss words. I don't think they're respectful. This, that, the other. They create an image of them. But they use them every time they want to avoid somebody else. Or not so much avoid, but they don't want to hear somebody else. Fuck you. You're an idiot asshole. You know. There you go. It's happened to me before. And it's funny. I think it's hilarious because it shows that rebellion inside people. It really does. And that the grim reality really turns them off. But the fact that they actually get that upset shows that they can be somebody who stands up for themselves. They're just standing up for something else. They're standing up for someone else. They're standing up for some other idea that they identify with, even though they may not truly identify with it, showing that they get so upset about it when you show a grim reality to them. I don't like to say grim reality. I like to say reality, but I gotta test the patience of people because they test mine. You know, and it's not only that, it's that people always look at reality as grim anyway. So it's not that far away or far-fetched to say it all the time. Because, oh, that's so grim. It's not. It's just what the reality is. So when you know, it's test to not just put one subjection of people's higher than others. And I think individuality does have that. Individuality shown as the rebellion or the grim reality. It's not really that. It's a test to not just put one subjection of people's higher than others. So, like, I can't really blame the government for doing what they do. Because it is a person. They're all human. But I can't blame the fact that they're doing it to us. And they're looking at us and saying, well, that person's a treasonist. You know, they're blaming the U.S. government for this. But there's evidence, you know. There's something I could back up my claim with, you know. And I think it's funny that a lot of people make fun of it in a way. Like, oh, there's a lot of people that do that, so, we can't take it seriously. And I think in a lot of ways, like, when people make jokes, the laughter and the jokes and the kind of stuff that just makes fun of things actually helps people forget about the reality. So much so that they'll defend an utter fallacy, a straw man argument, to just let things happen the way they are. But like I said, as always, it will happen, there'll be an end to it all. But that end may not justify the means of who's going to be there now. Maybe nobody. I think the shelf life of humans is pretty low, especially with how much humans will believe and not try to stop. Like one episode of Charmed recently I watched, it was like set in the 1800s with like the cowboy towns and everything. And one Indian was, really standing up to for the community because the sheriff and everybody was just trying to take over. And this kind of, pretty much police state kind of mentality. Martial law everywhere. The marshal was going to have the law, pretty much. And that's the funny thing about martial law and these kind of things. People don't believe it can happen in a lot of ways, but it has happened before. Cowboy towns were exactly that. And it's funny, people defend it from back then. But right now, oh no, that won't happen. But it did. Our history has actual showings of the exact same thing. And we parade it as a celebration. Cowboys, woohoo! But it's funny that people think it's impossible to happen now. Because these concrete slabs that we're on. These are concrete slabs, that's all they are. And I'm not bunching up anybody personally. Because the sad part of slavery and everything else, there were people who just let it happen because they were the overseers. They were the overseers. They had to, and even if they disagreed to it, they had to do that job. It's so funny. People never look at those parts of the story. They always look at the blacks being enslaved. They always look at the owners, but they never look at the people in between. The fact that a lot of Italians are used for slavery too. Enslaved too. And there were a ton of different races that were. And it's so funny that people forget about the fact that there's a lot of middle ground in all this that we never look at, that we have to stop completely. If we don't stop this stuff completely, guess what happens? It'll be constant. They could change the name of it, but it'll be constant. They could change the phrase of it, everything. And there is no, the they is us. They is us. So it's they, us, everything. Everyone. Because it's not an allowance that just comes, well, they should stop it on their own. No, it has to be all of us together. If we truly want to stop something, we have to show to these people that may say that we don't value our lives. We have to show the value of ourselves. And I think the insecurity of so many people has now gotten to a rotten level. So much so that there's there could be a paradigm shift, if we want to say that. But at the end of the day, it's all a rocky road. The rocky road of conclusion and thought. The rock and hard place has to be defeated. We can't have those things around us anymore. But a lot of people just want it that way because it's easier. It's a lot easier. There's no trappings. There's just something so constant about it. And I think it's funny that people will defend something based on that. That alone is the defense. Well, it stops here. But it doesn't stop there. That's the funny thing about it. People will say, it stops here. But it never does. And I think it's funny that people would defend it that way because it shows that there's this sort of emptiness in their hearts about what they don't want to do. What they don't want to step forward with personally or with some kind of idea or identity. That it's easier to still have a mouthful of nothing than to deal with what is going on. So that's it, guys. That's it for today. And I think I'll end it here. Send my love to all of you and take care, guys, girls. Pink Cloud is officially abrupted and continuous, constant, everything. Better for worse, for all the clenching sounds at the beginning that you may have heard while I was talking, apologies. But here is my heart, here is my love, here is my mind, and here's for thinking all the time.